Welcome to the Great Ideas Podcast, where we explore many topics, including leadership, teamwork, relationships, politics, economics, pop culture, health, sports, food, and anything else that's a great idea. I'm your host, Barry Moline. Today, we're talking with Paty Araiza, Sales Enablement Leader and Recruiter of early stage AI startups. Paty's journey in sales has been driven by a deep passion for developing others. From leading SDR teams to shaping sales strategies, she has always focused on mentorship, growth, and creating opportunities. Helping people step into their strengths and build fulfilling careers has been at the core of her work. That passion led her to launch ISA Recruiting, where she connects top talent with the right opportunities. Paty shares her journey from a sales background to establishing her recruiting business, highlighting her transition from a training platform to a recruiting service. We discuss current job market trends, the impact of AI on hiring, and the importance of trust and relationships in recruiting. Paty also reflects on the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated industry and emphasizes the significance of mentorship and self-awareness in career growth. It's a great conversation, and you're sure to learn a lot about sales and recruiting. Let's get into it. Well, hi, Paty. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Barry. Happy to be here.
Great. Hey, Paty, tell me about ISA Recruiting and what you do.
Yeah, great question. So what ISA Recruiting is all about, it's about connecting top talent, specifically in sales, to top startup companies. So I work primarily with early stage, I'm talking seed, Series A startups who are just starting to transition from going from founder-led sales to building their first sales team. So I work with the founders and CEOs to find the first sales hires, and these are top performers who have built other companies who now want to take those skills and build at new startups. That's basically what I do, as well as some interview coaching and resume help as well. So if somebody isn't necessarily a fit for a role that I'm currently recruiting for, I also help with interview and resume coaching, kind of peel back the curtain on what it is that recruiters and hiring managers are actually looking for when interviewing, when looking at a LinkedIn profile, when looking at a resume, and putting that into a digestible kind of coaching session so that they can take that away and be able to be more successful when applying to jobs.
So do you connect both the individuals who are looking for jobs as well as the startups that are trying to find people, right? That's what you're doing?
Exactly.
Got it. And so what inspired you to start your business?
Yeah, great question. So originally I started my business. It's called ISA Recruiting. The ISA stands for Ignite Sales Academy, because I actually started it as a training platform. My background has always been in sales. I've been an individual contributor, a manager, I've run sales enablement. And so my background was in sales and has been in sales, which is why I focus on sales for recruiting. But I realized there is a kind of excess demand or excess supply of sales trainers out there. I feel like everybody and their mother is running some sort of sales training. And what I saw the market demand was the candidates that I had trained getting hired. They're like, well, if you've already trained them, that would be great because we're looking for somebody. And so that naturally kind of led into, instead of focusing on just doing the training, doing more of the recruiting aspect and the placement, and then incorporating a little bit of training to obviously prepare the candidates that I'm passing through to the hiring manager, make sure that they're up to standard and to a very high quality that I present them.
So how do you find the companies and how do you find the people? I think they're two separate questions and maybe they're different channels of activity. How do you do that? How do you go down the road with each one?
So I've learned that recruiting is way more sales than sales ever was because you're selling to people. You're selling the company, right? I first have to go and find a company. And the way I do that is the same way, I guess, any salesperson sells. Cold outreach, emails, LinkedIn, video messages, networking. Sometimes there's platforms that I use as well, like Paraform to find clients, but yeah, a lot of that comes through just a lot of touches through LinkedIn. That's primarily.
Is there a place where you can find startups? Are there platforms? Do startups need to register somewhere? I don't know anything about startups. I don't know where to find them. I don't know if there's a singular place, a singular funnel. And how difficult is that just to make those connections? Because it seems to me like there could be thousands of startups going on at one time.
Yeah, there isn't like a singular place, I would say. I kind of use the filters on LinkedIn based on like location. Typically, San Francisco is a very big startup hub. Filters on companies that have gotten their seed round of funding in the last 4 months or a Series A round of funding, and then using that to narrow down the amount of companies as well as the number of employees. If they have more than, I would say, 50 employees, a lot of times they already have an internal recruiter in place or somebody that's helping with their talent. And then there's, I guess, not as much need with hiring somebody externally. So that's kind of the way I've been gone about filtering that down. I also work through a marketplace for recruiters called Paraform, where companies post jobs and then you can apply to be a recruiter for their job as well. But that's the first sale, is trying to get the company in and of itself is a sell on its own. And then the second, or I guess there's probably 3 sales. The second sale is trying to go find the candidates that match that job description. Sometimes I already know people within my network because I have had that background in sales, know somebody that could be a good fit, and I reach out to them and they go through an interview process and it works that way. Other times I'm sourcing myself. So I use a company called Juicebox that helps with sourcing, as well as sometimes outside, like virtual assistant helps if needed, depending on how many people they're looking for and how fast they're looking to hire. And then I go through and I vet every single profile and resume myself and schedule an interview with each of those people that I deemed a good fit and that are interested. And then the third sale happens where now I have to sell that person that's a good fit on the company as to why they should leave their job where they have security, where they are already doing well, to go jump into early stage startup with a lot of ambiguity and join that team and sell them on that piece. So it's a lot of sales throughout the entire process, I would say.
Yeah, that sure is. So do you maintain contact with people throughout their, maybe not their entire career, but from one job to the next? So you may place somebody, there's still a contact within your system, and depending on how it works out, or maybe it's time for them to move on, they can still come back to you to be in your system to look for another startup.
I mean, I would love for that to happen. I say recruiting's turning 1, and so I haven't done that necessarily yet.
Yeah.
It's more about building my network of recruiting and candidates and all that first. But my goal is to be very intentional with the people that I do connect with and interview, and I do guide them throughout the entire process and build a relationship with them that's not just transactional, let's get you in this seat, but let's figure out what is best for you personally and professionally. And so, I mean, I would continue to stay in touch with them, and I have continued to stay in touch with some of my candidates. And I hope that in case any of them are seeing this, I hope they know that they can always reach out to me if they're ever looking for another role in the future.
Yeah. But ultimately, your goal as a high-tech matchmaker or tech industry matchmaker, let's say, is you want happy companies, you want happy employees, and you want those companies to succeed, you want those employees to succeed, and for folks to stay in there with their companies because now everybody is, all boats are rising. So cool. That's interesting. I have a lot of questions about that. I wonder, since you have a lot of sales background, you're familiar with a variety of sales techniques, right? And this is not a quiz on sales techniques, but I'm curious about things like how important relationships are in the sales process. You mentioned the concept of the various sales, the three sales elements there. And, so you have relationships, you've got the job that you're focused on, and you're trying to match the company's position opening to the individual. And there's a sales process that has to go on there to convince the candidate that this is the right company, as well as, I'm sure, working with the company to say this is the right candidate.
Yes.
What kind of techniques, and I don't mean this in a manipulation kind of way, because I think that sales gets a bad rap when it comes to elements of manipulation. You're really just trying to create a win-win situation. So it's not about manipulating somebody and then they'll be unhappy later. You don't want that. So you want success. Everybody in the process wants success. Nevertheless, what are some of those secrets of your process that you rely on in your process? So, like, just take for example, relationships. Is that important?
It's incredibly important
Yeah.
because everything is based on trust. At the end of the day, I am the product, right? I don't have a product that, if somebody's like, Paty sucks, but, she built this really cool software and it gets the job done, that they're going to go buy the software regardless of who I am as a human being. No, like I am the product, and it starts with the company's trusting me that I am going to go find the right talent for them. And that takes a certain level of trust, especially as a founding account executive, because the CEOs are going from, this is their baby, right? They are the ones that are selling. They are doing their product demos. They understand what that's like. And now they have to give that to somebody else and trust that person, that person is not going to build a bad brand for the company, that they're not going to tarnish the company's reputation, that they're going to sell in a good manner. Like, that whole relationship of trust is incredibly important. And to answer your question about sales techniques, you're right. I feel like sales gets a bad rap because it's like sleazy and like, oh, you're manipulating or like you're pushing to do something, right? Something I believe in, and I've trained people on this, is if you're in a sales role, your job is not to convince anyone of anything, because that's when people start to get pushy. It's to ask the right questions, and a really, really good salesperson is going to ask the right questions that are going to show the pain and the true, like, what is it that they want, right? And this is the same with companies, right? They might say, I want somebody with 10 years of experience working in this industry, but why? Right? Why is that 10 years important? What about 5, right? Where is that coming from? What fears are coming into play that you don't want to hire from this specific company, but you want to hire from here, right? So asking those questions and understanding the deep-rooted why is probably the most important sales technique for selling anything. And it's something I use as well with companies and with candidates as well, right? Why is it that you're looking to transition into a different role? Where are you leaving? What's your ideal role looking like to a specific degree? Because I also don't want somebody to get to the point where they have an offer and then they decide, yeah, no, this is not for me. And we've gotten this far in the process.
So you're interested in a long-term relationship and long-term success. So that is probably different from a transactional sales situation like buying and selling a car. It's just, I want to get this thing out the door. I'm going to hide its flaws or do whatever. I don't care what happens afterwards. I'm not going to see that person ever again, or I'm going to hide from them, or I'm skipping town, whatever. You have your reputation, and therefore your process is different because of that long-term engagement.
Yeah, and I mean, I can say if you're a car salesperson, if you're the person that's asking, right questions about, well, why are you looking for a car? What kind of car do you envision yourself driving? I don't know. What's the mileage that you drive? Where are you driving to, right? Painting a picture, and you're not that pushy salesperson, you're probably going to get a lot of referrals as well.
Yeah.
And I've actually hired some people that were car salespersons who used that approach and were very, very successful in their trade because they didn't try to be sleazy.
Right. Well, and that makes sense. I agree with you that when somebody is looking out for your best interests, you do develop that trust. And also they might find along the way that the situation is not a good fit. And you might say, let's wait for the next one to come along because this is not the perfect fit for you. Well, that's cool. Good. Thank you for that. Well, since you're involved in hiring in the tech sector, this is late April of 2025, and the economy, it appears to be a little shaky right now. I'm not sure that I would categorize it or characterize it as heading toward a recession. I'm not really quite sure, but there is a lot of uneasiness in the world today. We've been dealing with President Trump's tariff proposals, and I know that the stock market has dropped recently, and the tech sector has taken probably the biggest part of that hit in terms of the stock drop. And I'm wondering what trends you're seeing as somebody who focuses on the tech sector. What's happening with employees? What's happening with the companies? Any observations?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anything specific that has changed like the moment tariffs went into effect. And I would say, thankfully, software isn't affected by tariffs as far as I know. So kind of safe from that for now, at least. I don't know what the plans are for the future, but I think there is an overall sense of like foreboding doom, just kind of with the job market, the economy, the country, the way things are headed in life, I would say, which I think there isn't like a specific like thing I can pinpoint. What I would say is hiring managers have become a lot more risk adverse and aren't necessarily willing to coach up as much. I would say a few years back, it was more of, well, if they're learning, if they've done something somewhat similar, we'll bring them on and then coach up, or, they'll learn as they go. Now I think it's more of the trend of like, no, we want somebody who's already done it. And so I've seen that, as well as comp being lower, not like just
compensation.
on the compensation, yeah. I would say not as high as it could be. And I think that's also just be leading with the being risk adverse of, not necessarily wanting to invest a bunch of money in somebody that might not stay.
Yeah, interesting. I've talked to a few AI people in the last few months, and they have said that there is a trend with the advances in AI for there to be a greater focus on hiring of less experienced people that can tap into the hive mentality, the hive brain of greater experience that already exists out there. So a less experienced person can take advantage of more complicated coding that is in AI systems, and they don't have to be as experienced because they already can do the coding. I mean, the AI system can do the coding. They have to be able to prompt the system. The point is, you don't need as many senior people. This was the philosophy that was told to me. You don't need as many senior people in your company. you need more junior people that can tap into AI programming. And then the result of that is this person said large layoffs, but a significantly lower need for people in the tech sector. Have you heard that concept of the future?
I haven't necessarily heard that, and I think it's different with like software developers and coding than it is with sales in that regard of the like less experienced people. I actually think it's the opposite. I think what I've seen is one of the biggest pieces of a workforce in a sales organization is SDRs, which are entry level, not very experienced people. And the role of the SDR typically is...
Wait, SDR? What is that?
It stands for Sales Development Representative. And so it's an entry level role, and their role is basically to be appointment setters. And almost every company, if you're an SDR, you are focusing on high volume number of emails sent, high volume number of cold calls, high volume of messages sent to then book an appointment for the more experienced account executive, AE, who is then going to actually walk through and ask those discovery questions, go through the demo and negotiate and close. And so what I have seen is a big trend towards almost abolishing the SDR role or like making that more of a high scale role where it's if they're doing outreach, it's very personalized outreach. They're working with marketing. They're collaborating a lot more because AI can take care of sending 100 almost auto personalized emails. And so there isn't that need for that entry level job. And so, or I've seen a lot of companies just say, okay, the account executives are going to set their own appointments as well. They're going to do everything because that saves them money. And also they already have that experience and they can tap into AI and do it that way. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of the opposite trend in the sales.
Huh. Okay. That's good. Thank you for clarifying there. So now let's talk about inside the business, about what leaders can do inside of a company to actually retain their top talent so they can build a culture where people can thrive and the company thrives. What ideas do you have there where companies can improve their culture?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. And I would say the first thing, especially if you're early stage startup, is actually making an intention on what you want the culture to be defined by. Because if there's not an intentionality behind it, I think it's very easy for it to become something else that they never meant to intend to do. And also if it's not defined, then I think that's when biases in hiring also come into play of, I can go get a beer with this person and vibe with this person. And it's like, okay, is that the culture or what is the culture aside from like, can you vibe with that person, right? So I think first off, being intentional with like, what are the values that this company wants to focus on. And then as far as success within a culture, I think transparency and trust are probably the biggest things. Understanding why, right? There's a lot of things that are happening very, very, and this is in any company, but especially in startups, moving really quickly. And even just providing that little bit of insight as to why we're pivoting from selling this way to selling this way, why the script is changing this, why the quotas were raised, right? Having that insight lessens anxiety, right? It creates a safe space. And that's what people want. People don't want to be in a state of constant anxiety where they're like, is my job on the line? What am I supposed to be doing? Why are we doing this now? Is this the right thing? Is this the right thing? And so that's where transparency and trust, because if you're building that transparency, you're able to get that trust, really comes into play. And I would say those are the two biggest things that then everything else about, maybe having fun or collaboration or integrity or all that comes into play in that area.
I think that leaders are reluctant to share a lot of that information. It's great to share it because employees have the capability to understand it and they want to know what's going on. one of the top things that employees want to know about a company is feeling in on things. They don't have to be involved in the decision making. That's the job of the senior leaders. That's perfectly fine. But just knowing what some of the issues are that they're dealing with is really helpful. But it's hard for leaders to let go of that information because they might think, oh, this is sensitive, or it's a little scary. I remember in COVID, I ran a trade association in my career, and the finances were bad. And I sat down with our staff, with the entire company, and said, here's the situation. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm just going to tell you the facts. And then I'll tell you what my plan is to shore up the revenue. And then let's brainstorm other ideas for how to bring in more revenue. And it was scary for me to share that because here's the scary part. I thought people are just going to run out and tell others, oh, the sky is falling, hair on fire, whatever it might be. And instead, people rolled up their sleeves and collaborated and said, here's ideas. Let's brainstorm. And we did brainstorm and came out better as a result. But I was scared. As the CEO, I was afraid to do that. But I did it, and the result was better. And I think what you're saying is that when a senior leader does that in an organization, whether it's a manager or a vice president or the CEO, when they're sharing that information with their staff, people have the capability to accept the facts, and they want to help with ideas to make it better, right? Isn't that more or less what you're saying, that creates a better culture?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the financials, sure, there are some things that are confidential, but it makes a huge difference in knowing, like I remember back when I worked at a startup, like sitting down and learning what our customer acquisition cost was and being like, this is why we need to get sales up and we need to create a more sustainable process because our cost of acquisition for a customer is way too high, right? And like now it's not just this like, oh, they just want more money and they're making us do this because they're greedy. It's like, oh no, like we if we want the company to successfully get acquired or get the next round of funding, this is where we need to be at. And so it really helps people to rally behind a goal. And it does start with, for you, like the CEO, it's very hard to try to establish that culture of transparency if it starts with like middle management trying to do their best and they don't know the answers and they're like half explaining and then they're having to figure it out. So transparency from the top down is huge.
Yeah. All right. So flip it around. What are the characteristics of an employee that are attractive to an employer?
Ooh, that's a really good question. One of my favorite that I kind of distinguish, especially for salespeople, between good and great salespeople that I kind of realize maybe right away, like this person is going to be a top performer versus maybe this person's going to struggle a little bit, is having their own self-awareness. I think self-awareness is a huge, huge positive trait to have, to be able to critically analyze your areas of opportunity for growth, your weaknesses and your strengths, and be able to learn from them and know, okay, yes, I need to work on this area. I can see that. Now I can go reach out to my manager or my superior or trainer or even go listen to some podcasts myself to help myself be better in this area versus having an unrealistic perspective of I'm perfect or I could have done this better, but it's because I didn't know this and they didn't train us on this and I didn't do that, right? And so I think that's one of the most underrated traits that people, I don't know, it's something I test for in interviews and stuff, is getting their feedback on how they're doing what they did and seeing how self-aware they are on themselves.
How do you go about improving your own self-awareness? Is this like taking a disc analysis or something like that? Or paying attention to feedback you're getting? if people are listening to you or wandering off. Nevertheless, what are the kinds of actions that I can take as an employee or employees can take to increase my own self-awareness? Or maybe the question is, how do you analyze somebody's self-awareness? So you're asking people questions about their self-awareness. What kind of things do you want to improve on, I guess, or what are your weaknesses and strengths, and right, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that the road that you go down when you're trying to find if somebody is self-aware? Is when
Yeah, I wouldn't say like give me your strengths and weaknesses, because I feel like that's a really really like cliche question.
It is.
But what are you doing this year for your own self-improvement, right? How are you investing in yourself might be a question that showcases, like, do they care about growth? Do they have areas that they themselves know they need to work on? Specifically in sales, if I do any sort of role play, I always ask, what do you think you could have done better in? And what do you think you did well in? And that gives me a pretty good idea. Some people are very in tune, and they're like, I know I said a million times, and I didn't objection handle the way you taught us, or I missed that objection and I had to go back and forget about this, right? And that's great. And they're like, how would I have responded to that, right? Like, even better, right? They're not only aware, but they're also wanting to grow, right? Versus somebody who maybe said 50 times and trying to pitch something, and then I'm like, well, how did you do? And they're like, well, I could have been a little more confident, but I think I did great. I wouldn't say I needed to work on anything, right? Like, that's lack of self-awareness. And to improve self-awareness, I think the first thing is being open to criticism and realizing, and this is very hard, realizing that when somebody gives you feedback, usually, hopefully their intent is to make you be better, and that they're not criticizing you as a person and your character and your persona, but, they're providing feedback on a specific action, not you as a person, but your behavior. And so I think that kind of being able to separate that is also really important to build self-awareness.
Yeah, that's really good. Understanding the process and who you are as a person, wherever you are in a company, but nevertheless, that the idea of wanting to improve, being aware of what needs to get improved, really valuable. So when you are recognizing that people are a company's greatest asset, how does a company invest? Well, I guess it's both the company and the individual. How do you focus on relationships? What are ways to connect better with people so that the company connects with its employees and gets the most out of its employees, and the employees connect better with other people in the company so that they are of greater value to the company? How do you see that relationship connection? What are those activities that take place?
I gotta say, Barry, you want to stump me there, because I'm not sure if I fully have thought that much into that specific question as far as specific activities. So I guess, are you saying things like, I don't know, team activities to bring the team together, or just overall things that a company can do to make sure that their employees are working as hard as possible and enjoying being there? Is that kind of where you're getting at?
Let me ask you this question. What do you do to develop relationships with some of your potential clients? Because I think it's the same question.
Keep it real. I mean, that's about the best answer that I can give you. Keep it real as a manager. Keep it real if you're a recruiter, right? Like, not just, okay, how'd you do in the job interview and this and this. It's like, okay, what about, I have my daughter sometimes with me. I think we might have mentioned that before, but she's screaming in the background. That's a great conversation topic. If they have kids, checking in about their kids, their growth goals, right? Because our jobs are a very small part of, well, they're a big part making our lives the way we want them to be, right? Like our money, financial freedom, what we want to accomplish in life, who we want to be, right? Which for me, my business is a means to an end to be able to financially provide for my daughter and have the freedom and ability to be there for her. That's the whole reason I started my business to begin with, right? And so there's many personal reasons why people join companies and join jobs, and understanding that, right? Like, I think that is at the core of it. It's not you're here to make money, but like you can make money a million different ways, right? Like, why here? Why now? And how does this apply to your personal mission and your personal life? And like, being real about that and upfront and trying to keep that a top of mind conversation is kind of the way I've kept that relationship, I guess, with my candidates and clients and when I led a team as well.
Well, that's good advice. You said, keep it real. And I wasn't sure what you meant by that. We're from different generations, but now I get it after that explanation, which is, be authentic. Show yourself what's going on in your world. Obviously, you said we have a job to do and we have to get that done. The way that we develop our relationships and the way we become dependent on each other is through knowing each other. And the way you do that is by talking about what's really going on in your life. So at least that's what I heard. Is that more or less what you said?
You are definitely right. And I think if you're able to build that relationship, you're a CEO and you have a personal relationship with your staff, that goes such a long way, because now you're working harder because you're valued and cared for. And yes, at the end of the day, it shouldn't be a family. They're not going to keep you there financially, but there's a level of that you can show, like, even if we do have to let you go financially, like, I am here for you as a person. I will see it. And I've seen this actually very sad with layoffs where managers had to let go of team. I have actually been in that position where I've let go of 50% of my team. And then I did everything I could after I had to deliver those horrible news to let them know, like, I will help you find a job. I will be your reference. I will coach you on what I need to do, because this was a very tough business decision, but it's not personal to our relationship, and I care about you as a person. So I think that goes a long way.
I will say that as a CEO, I always had difficulty in sharing personal information about me. Some, but not a ton. Whereas I did feel a responsibility to learn as much as I could about my employees to be able to connect with them. I was not good on the reverse. And over time, I knew that was a weakness of mine and that I had to do a better job of it. Nevertheless, it's just something that I struggled with, because I know that it was part of having an authentic presence and helping people get to know me as a person. So I have a strange question for you. You're a woman. I'm a man. And what do you feel, if anything, are challenges that face you as a woman in, I think the tech sector is kind of male heavy, right? Are there any issues related to gender that are challenges to you?
I would say, I think in the recruiting space, and before that I did enablement, it was a lot more women dominated as far as like that specific, especially in enablement. I was very surprised. I mean, enablement falls under training sector. And so maybe it's because, there are more women teachers, more women trainers, that somehow that was the case. So I would say, I wouldn't say I necessarily experienced any sort of, maybe I did and I just didn't notice it, but like direct, like, I don't know, I'm a woman, hence this happened, or I didn't get this opportunity or anything like that as a result of being a woman. And in my enablement or recruiting role, being an individual contributor, I feel like that was a little different in sales, being the only woman in the sales floor with kind of male aggressive Wolf of Wall Street vibes. This is how you sell. This is what you have to go into. And I was quote unquote taught, I would say, because we didn't really have training when I joined the startup, like this is the way you sell, right? I remember like looking on YouTube, and there are no women that were big sales women gurus and stuff. And I think that's changed with a lot of LinkedIn. I think of like Sam McKenna and Melissa Calgioni now, which are like big salespeople. Selling Sarah's another one. There's that's up and coming. But I think it was very isolating to be the only woman there. And it wasn't like I faced anything necessarily of like aggression or discrimination in a way, but it made me wonder, like, is this possible for me? Because I don't want to be that person, but I felt like I had to be. And there was nobody for me to turn to and go, oh, I don't have to be pushy and salesy and aggressive, and I can be successful. And there's all these women that are successful. I just didn't have that. So I would say that's where being a woman kind of has played into it. That, and I also wonder how many times men CEOs are told, oh, wow, you look so young. You're running your own company. I wonder if they get the same response that I do about my age.
Yeah, interesting. So as a result of that, when you come across a woman that is looking to move up, do you try to serve as a model in some way, or offer a little bit additional advice on the world of work? Is that anything that you're thinking about?
I think it depends. I think some of the women that I have gotten a chance to interview serve as examples for me. They've had like a 10-year career in sales at killer companies and were trailblazers themselves, kind of making a name for themselves. And so I don't know if I have more to offer them necessarily. I would say somebody starting out breaking into tech sales is more where that guidance might come in and offering that and just, I wouldn't say like anything specific, but just letting them know like you can do it and it has been done. I wouldn't have launched my business if it wasn't for the example of other women that I saw do it. And so I think just having that, I know people talk about representation, but having that representation is so incredibly important.
And being an ally, even a word of encouragement can go really far from somebody that you trust and respect. All right, so coming to an end, I have a couple of questions about advice. Tell me about some good advice that you've received in your life. It could be from one person, it could be from multiple people. Have you received any particular advice from anyone that you said, oh, that's good, I need to do more of that?
Ooh, I covered my head because I feel like I have gotten just so much good advice over the past year of building my business in all different forms of life, from like balancing like motherhood and building it to how do I incorporate like my mission and my faith into what I'm doing, to just advice on like building a business in financial sense.
I'll tell you some advice that I got that stuck with me a long time ago. And it wasn't advice intended for me. It was from a class that I took in graduate school. It was a business class. And I think this particular class was small business development, something of that nature. And it was meant to be focusing on entrepreneurial mindset. And in the class, a variety of groups formed to create a product to then bring that product to market. So it was a very applied class. The whole semester was about bringing products to market from start to finish. And in fact, it started where everyone in the class, and I think there were 75 people, everyone had to make a presentation about a product that could be a group product. And then those products were chosen, and then you formed these groups where people then worked on marketing and production and all kinds of things, and in the end presented a business plan. So it was a really cool class to look at the entire cycle of a business. So we did everything, soup to nuts, learned everything in the class. Great class. And at the end of the class, and it was taught by a banker, and I'm not sure why this person was a banker, but I think bankers have to fund projects and they look at a lot of business plans. And that was a good person to look holistically at a business plan and tell others or teach others what should be in a business plan and what was important. And at the end of the class, the very last day, the very last few minutes, somebody asked this question, which was, we learned a lot in this class, but what's the most important thing? And the teacher paused and thought and said, watch your cash flow. You got to have money to pay people. You got to have money to pay the bills. You got to have money to do everything. You can get that as a loan. You can get that as an investor, but you got to have money in the bank. Watch your cash flow. And I used that advice my entire life because when I was put in charge of a budget at, I don't know, probably 35 years ago, whether it was my departmental budget or then growing to the entire company budget, I realized how important it was to have money to keep the business going. And it wasn't quite daily, but it absolutely was weekly, or sometimes multiple times a week. I was working with my financial people. Where are we on the money? How are we doing? And where's the money flowing, coming in, going out, so on and so forth, and then trying to match up our needs with all those things, bank loans and so on and so forth, but managing the cash flow. And there are many elements of a business, but the cash flow was one of them that just constantly stuck with me. And I never would have imagined that would have been important had that person not said anything. And it was just kind of interesting. So that was, for me, a big piece of advice that I wasn't planning to get, but used a lot. So that was mine. I don't know. Have you thought of anything?
Kind of your question sparked of what's the most important thing, right? That kind of sparked a little idea in my head out of like, well, what have I learned? It's been a year, and I'm actually reflecting on like making a LinkedIn post recapping the year that it's been in running the business. And so what's the most important lesson I've learned this year? And it's probably the lesson I'm going to continue to learn, and the advice I've gotten and continues to resonate in my head about running the business is, we've talked about trust. And for me, trust comes from God. And so I think the best advice I have received from many different people comes along the lines of trusting in God, that I'm not going to starve to death if my business fails. Nobody's going to die if my business fails, right? The stakes are not that high. Sometimes, we can get carried out in the weeds of things and in revenue. And I remember a quote kind of related to cash flow. If you don't have revenue, you don't have a business, you have a hobby. But I think the best advice I have received is put in the work and then trust in God and reap the rewards. And something I'm going to continue to live by and see where it takes me.
Well, that's good advice, and it's good that you're doing it in your business. So I'm eager to read your LinkedIn post about things that you learned after a year in business. So that's fantastic. Well, Paty, thanks for the conversation. This has been great, and good luck. You're definitely in a sector that has a lot of shifting around. So I think you found a niche where you're needed.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I feel like it's a lot of turmoil and changes. Some can be good, some can be bad, but I'm excited to be on this roller coaster ride.
Great. Thank you. Thanks to Paty Araiza for being our guest today. And thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch, or if you have an interesting topic and you know someone you think would be a great guest on the show, send me an email at barry@barrymoline.com. And please leave a 5-star review, which helps others find their way to the Great Ideas Podcast.